signed a coalition agreement which said the provision was to abstain. I thought I ought to honour that, and I ought therefore to retain my influence in the rest of this Parliament by keeping that coalition deal. If I'd been a backbencher, I would have voted against, because I don't support the policy. I didn't support it at the time. I've made that clear. Now, my job now, the reason I've taken on the job I have, is to mitigate the effects of the policy, to make sure we have the best possible outcomes, and that does include the EMA debate. And just so people know, I have engaged already with Andy Burnham about the future of EMA. We've had very responsible and respectful both public and private discussions. I will work with Labour and everybody else to make sure we don't do things that disincentivize people to go to ethnic college. I understand the issue. Nobody's defending the present system as being perfect, but we do need the system. Polly's been very vocal about this. We do need the system that makes sure your travel costs, the kitchen meals, and the other things that act as incentives or disincentives are retained. And I will seek to do that. I'm not a government minister, but I will be making recommendations to make sure we go down that road. Just two last things, Polly. On the Sunda point about graphs, the IFS and things. The IFS is great, but it's not always perfect. I never say it's always perfect when we're in opposition, so I don't think you should just say because the IFS says something, it is true. It is often true, and we need to assume that it's intended to be true, but let's have the debate with them. I am clear, and the party is clear, that we need to reduce the gap between rich and poor. And I go to this government challenged, if you like, fired up by the fact that having been in Parliament for 27 years, I have seen the gap between the rich and the poor increase under the Tories. I expected that, and then increase more under Labour. I didn't expect that. I didn't see the targets of child poverty met as Labour had hoped. I didn't see the targets of food poverty met as Labour had hoped. I want us to do better than that. Now, I realise we are restrained by the fact that we're in government with Tories who don't share all those objectives. We will do the best we can. And I agree with Will's friend on this, that the economy is sensible. The other things you were generous enough to concede we're going in the right direction, similar to constitutional reform. I actually think foreign policy, the government is a much more progressive government on Europe than it would have been if we weren't there, if the Tories had been there on their own. But yes, the economy in the end is where we'll be judged. It's a 5-year deal. We will stick with it for 5 years. And in the end, we have to see whether there are more people in work, more sustainable jobs, and more people having satisfactory lives in the beginning. That will be the case.
Listen, I welcome the tone of the debate because I think, for example, the admission by Simon that he's not going to pretend that the VAT rise is progressive or fair is welcome. But I have the same corrupting sense that I had when I debated Tim Farron on Wednesday evening, which is that the gap between how Liberals see themselves as part of a centre-left possibility and future for this country, and the reality that they are now part of a centre-right project determined to keep itself in power for a number of years, is becoming ever more painful for them. It's a kind of political equivalent of a nervous breakdown. And actually, the reason that that matters takes you in a couple of directions. First of all, we know in the Labour Party the test is different in government. Frankly, it doesn't matter that much whether you say something is fair or progressive if the lived experience of constituents is actually deeply regressive. And in that sense, I think it's partly a process of Liberal Democrats in coming to terms with the fact that actually they're going to be judged now on what they do and not simply what they say. But the second point is this: it's really up to Liberal Democrats to choose both who they go into coalition with and how they seek to describe or defend the policies that they're articulating. I would say, Simon, if you're willing to work with us to stop the injustice of what we're about to see on educational maintenance allowances this week or on housing benefit, it is indefensible to say to somebody who's doing all the right things, has been unemployed for 12 months in an economy where there are 5 people chasing every job vacancy, that we're going to cut their housing benefit by 10%, which is the policy of the government of which the Liberal Democrats are part. Work with us on those policy changes, and there is an open hand and a welcoming conversation to try and achieve better outcomes, because our responsibility as a responsible government is to try and minimise the impact of this coalition's policies on the lives of many people across the country. But if there is a genuine openness to work with you on policy, then I have to say I think there is a divergence on politics. Because I return to the point I began with. Every time that Nick Clegg makes a speech saying, poverty plus £1 is not the answer, but then says poverty minus £1 is the answer, you demean the very currency of the political traditions that you assert yourself to be part of. And in that sense, I don't think it's adequate to say we didn't agree with the IFS all the time in opposition, therefore we're not going to be bound into them in the future, because they produce evidence that makes clear on the central economic judgments you're now part of a central right project. And in that sense, we can have an argument about 5 days in May if we like. Frankly, that's irrelevant. The question now is, on the central economic judgments, I think you've placed your chips on a part of the table for which your political tradition offers no heritage or defence, but also from which, if you continue to assert that actually these are all fair and progressive, it will actually demean the currency of all of us who want to argue for a central right future. And in that sense, that's why I welcome the answer on VAT. I would have more confidence that you would be able to pursue your politics and we would be able to have a sustained conversation if sometimes you just said, listen, this is the price of power. I think this policy stinks, but on balance, I think it's better that we get into coalition with the Conservatives than under minority Conservative government. I think if you go beyond that into trying to pretend that, for example, in tuition fees, your policy today is exactly the same as it was on the 4th of May, then actually it doesn't just damage you, but it damages the broader political tradition that you assert that you represent.